Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So this most recent game with the Cleveland Browns had me thinking of a couple of things. One, how much of the Jameis Winston experience are we going to have tolerance for when these games actually matter, right? Like, I think right now the games are what they are. If the Browns win, good. If the Browns lose, they're at the point of the year where it's like, okay, as long as you fight hard, like, I don't think people are really tripping that hard over a loss, right? So Jameis throwing 2 pick sixes, and the way that he threw those pick sixes just isn't going to be focused on in the same way that we would focus on it if this were September and we thought the season was still alive. Like, if the Browns were, instead of 3-8 going into that game, they were 5-5 or something like that, or somewhere closer to 500, right? It's 5-6 or 6-5, and this was like a make or break wild card game, and the Browns lost it in that way. I think we would receive it a lot differently. But because we're 3-8, like, we're just happy somebody threw 500 yards. We're just happy that Deshaun Watson's not out there. I do wonder, once that wears off, like, how much are we gonna have for this Jameis thing if we're talking about extending this for 2 more years or a year after this. I think it's a serious question to ask, even if you're somebody who really does believe in Jameis, right? Or thinks that Jameis has the ability to kind of be more than a bridge. I think you got to ask yourself the question, like, hey, these interceptions, they don't bother us right now because we're not good. We don't have a good record. But would these interceptions bother me more if this team were closer to achieving something that I think they're capable of achieving? But that's not the main topic of today's video, right? I'm going to do a whole video about how you can win with Jameis Winston and if you can win with Jameis Winston. That film breakdown will be coming out either today or tomorrow. Or what I want to talk about today is the Browns' run game, because the other thing I noticed in that game was that Jameis Winston had to throw the ball almost 60 times. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, Ken Dorsey got too pass happy. I don't think that's the case. I think the case was the only way the Browns were moving the ball in that game at a regular clip was throwing it. Like, they had to throw the ball to move the ball because that was the only avenue they were having success, amazingly, versus the Denver Broncos secondary. So if that's the case, if you had to throw the ball to move it, you're going to throw the ball a lot. And that presents the problem. You're throwing the ball 58 times with Jameis Winston. And again, I'll talk about this in my video about him that's going to come out in the next few days. But it's not like Jameis is out there throwing like 58 jabs, right? And he's just staying fresh. He's throwing 58 haymakers when he throws 58 passes. And that clearly had an effect on him by the end of this game. And it's not the first time that we've seen it. If you want to play with Jameis or play with any quarterback that's not going to be a franchise game changer, right? And like, Lamar Jackson's not going to fall into your lap anytime soon. Joe Burrow's not going to fall into your lap anytime soon. Patrick Mahomes is not going to fall into your lap anytime soon. And outside of having one of those guys, you cannot be out here throwing the ball 58 times and think that that's going to not backfire on you eventually. Again, I get why they had to throw the ball as much as they did. It was the only way that they could move the ball. And the solution here is that the Browns need to develop their run game a little bit more thoroughly, because that's the issue, right? They had to throw the ball 58 times because the run game was so bad in this game. And honestly, it's been bad for like the second half of last year plus this year. And Nick Chubb's been in here for some of it. And look, I think Nick Chubb would be better next year, a year removed from that knee injury. But still, we are like 18 games into it, and we have seen this run game just not be what you want it to be. I think there's some harsh realities that the Cleveland Browns have to face. I don't think Joe Bitonio is your best option at left guard going forward. I think Ethan Posick had a couple of good years, but now it doesn't look like he's been useful for you. And Wyatt Teller has been inconsistent since 2021. It's just been the case. He's been inconsistent since the end of the 2021 season. Ever since then, he has been up and down. And I don't think that's very useful for this team. We cannot run block at any effective level. And it's not Jermaine Ifedi's fault why we can't run block, right? We can't just blame this thing on injury. The Browns are pretty healthy on this offensive line outside of left tackle. They have their starting left guard. They have their starting center. They have their starting right guard. They have their starting right tackle. And they still can't get any sizable push on the run, whether they're running to the right side or running to the left side, which tells me that there's a lot of replacement that needs to be done on this offensive line. You're the Browns. You need to rerun this offensive line, right? Like, I think this offensive line has aged thoroughly. The starters aren't playing well. It is what it is. So you could do this with free agency in the draft. Now, a lot of people, whenever you bring up free agency, they go, what money, Quincy? We ain't got no money in free agency. Well, it's easy. Let's talk about it. Restructuring Deshaun Watson's contract, Joe Bitonio retiring, and then moving on from like Juan Thornhill and Ethan Polsick. That would create about $35 million of cap space for 2024. My bad, 2025, my bad. That would create about $35 million of cap space in 2025. So that solves one problem pretty much immediately, right? Like, you're worried about the cap space. You're worried about Bitonio and all the money that you have owed this year. You're likely going to restructure Watson. It makes sense for both sides to do it. Joe Bitonio, if he retires, that's going to be an easy fix for getting rid of his money. And then Juan Thornhill, you're likely moving on from him. Ethan Polsick, you can move on from him. Boom, $35 million in cap space. That's enough to solve your problems on the interior of the offensive line, at least, right? If the Browns want to be more aggressive in free agency this offseason, they could cut Conklin, right? Find a trade partner for Wyatt Teller. That would up that number to $57 million of cap space in 2025. So if the Browns want cap space this offseason, they can get cap space this offseason. It's not really an issue. I know that the Watson contract and the way it's talked about, people make it seem like cap space will be unattainable for the Browns, but they can let this Watson thing run off, restructure him, and they will have up to $57 million of cap space this year. They could have up to like 60 next year, and then they would be back up plus 100 in the cap 2027 and beyond. The Watson contract doesn't really handcuff you in the cap as much as people think it does, right? You can't go buck wild in free agency, right? Like, you're not going to sign like 18 starters in free agency or anything like that, but you can still have functional money in free agency if you're the Cleveland Browns. So what does that mean? Who would be available in free agency that would help the Cleveland Browns? If we're talking about running backs, I would heavily sway away from running back in free agency. The only one that looks appealing is Najee Harris. And I'm not a big fan of Najee. He's having a good year in a contract year, but like, his work not in the contract year has not been inspiring to me. So I would stay away from that, especially when the draft class is so strong at running back this year. Now, when it comes to guard, I think you have some appealing options here if you're the Browns, right, in free agency. Keep in mind, a guard's probably going to cost the most a guard that I pull up is talking about is like $8 million. Like, Will Hernandez would probably be $6 to $8 million. Mekhi Becton could be about $6 to $8 million. James Daniel, you could probably get for like $4 to $6 million, right? But those are the three guards that I have pulled up. James Daniels, Mekhi Becton, Will Hernandez. Those are guys who could start at guard and be really good for you. Like, Mekhi Becton, you have the injury history, right? Can he stay on the field? But the athleticism and the size there is unparalleled. The Browns really do need somebody who can move bodies on that line of scrimmage. Mekhi Becton is a body mover. He's a people mover, right? That's what he does. He does really good at that pull. He does really good finding contact, second level, and then moving people because he's big, strong, heavy, right? That's what Mekhi Becton does. James Daniel is a veteran guard. He'll be serviceable if you put him in there. He did have a season-ending injury this year, so you have to worry about how he's going to come back off of that. And then Will Hernandez, not the biggest guard in the world. He's only like 6'2", but he's a really strong guard, right? And I think he's a guard that can move people, and get people off the line. He's been a good starting guard in the NFL. So that would be about at most $8 million for any of those guys. I don't see like Mekhi Becton signing somewhere for like 12 or something like that. and that could be helpful for you. You could plug one of your guard positions easy like that. So let's say, I think if you trade Wyatt Teller and you want to be aggressive with cap space this year for whatever reason, that would be a move that would make sense, right? Ship out Wyatt Teller, bring in Mekhi Becton, maybe James Daniels or Will Hernandez, to be able to plug into that one guard spot, right? And then you would draft somebody for the other guard spot to replace Batonio, and then have them compete with Zach Zinter. Depending on who you draft, it may or may not be a fair competition for Zach Zinter, because like if you draft somebody in the first round, that person's going to win that competition. But depending on where you're at, it might make sense to start Zinter. It might make sense to start the rookie. Hell, you might want to rotate your offensive line so that you could start multiple guys there. But yeah, you can get a guard in free agency, a starting quality guard, and you can get that guard under $10 million. I'm pretty sure of it. When it comes to center, you can take some flyers on guys who could be starting centers, right? Nate Herbig from Pittsburgh, he's been somebody who's played well in his limited snaps at center. Austin Corbett might be a familiar name. He was the 33rd pick of the Browns 2018 draft. He's somebody who could come in and compete at center with Luke Whippler, and then whoever wins out that competition wins it out. I think just moving on from Posick and getting somebody larger at center is another thing that would benefit the Browns. I think overall, the Browns need to get bigger on the offensive line, right? Like that is the main thing here. They're short on the offensive line and not very powerful. They need to get bigger on the offensive line. If you want to keep Wyatt Teller around because of that, that makes sense. If you don't want to keep Wyatt Teller because he's inconsistent, that makes sense. But you need to have a focus on getting bigger, stronger at the offensive line. Both those guys are bigger than your current option at Ethan Posick. And then Luke Whippler also, 6'2", bigger than Ethan Posick as well. So you would add more height and strength on the offensive line there. So those are like the free agent options for guard and center. And I think that the Browns will probably pursue some of these options. Like I think Mekhi Becton will be something they heavily pursue. I don't know about Will Hernandez. He doesn't really fit the guardrails that the Browns like to look for. But James Daniel would also make sense for them too. And I think they probably take a chance here at Nate Herbig as well. All right, so let's talk about the draft, right? What can you solve in the draft? What does this draft have? What does this draft not have when it comes to improving your run game? I think this draft has a lot when it comes to improving your run game. Even some of the tackles in this draft, they might not be great pass blocking tackles in the NFL. They might just be serviceable there. But some of these tackles who people are projecting to be guards could be really good run blocking tackles, right? Like Will Campbell. Don't think he's going to be a great pass blocker in the NFL as a tackle. Do think he can run block in the NFL as a tackle. Kelvin Banks, similar kind of situation. He's super long, so he might survive as a pass blocker in the NFL, but I think he's more of a run blocker as well. But those are like the guys that you could go to on the offensive line at the top of this draft. Both of those guys, if you draft them at guard, they're going to be really good at guard, right? I think Kelvin Banks is somebody who has more potential to be a tackle than Will Campbell, because Will Campbell's just not long and he doesn't have the feet that you want a tackle to have. That's a similar issue with Kelvin, but Kelvin at least has the length that you want a tackle to have to make up for the feet, and you can teach him the feet as he goes along. So those would be the two offensive linemen I would target. The only running back that you would probably target early in the first round is Ashton Jeanty. We know him very good running back out of Boise. No surprise there. And then you got guys like Josh Simmons, like Ariante Ursery out of Minnesota, Cam Williams. These are guys that I wouldn't necessarily draft where the Browns are likely to pick. The Browns pick range is pretty wide. They could be the 6th pick in the draft. They could be the 16th pick in the draft. I think it's most likely that they end up being between the 6th and the 9th pick in the draft. That makes a ton of sense to me, right? So I want to draft Josh Simmons with the 6th pick in the draft. I want to draft Ariante Ursery with the 6th pick in the draft, especially since he's a right tackle, right? Cam Williams, want to draft him with the 6th pick. Again, another right tackle. Now, this is with the idea of like, oh, DeJuan's going to play left, and then you could draft the right tackle there, move back in the draft, pick up some extra picks, probably use one of those extra picks for a running back. I think that's going to be a very attractive option for this team as well. If you look at the second round, there's a ton of options here to get better in your run game. Ton of running backs, Quincy Junkins out of Ohio State / Ole Miss, or Ali Gordon out of Oklahoma State, Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. 3 really good running backs there. Then you got guards, and tackles, right? So Tyler Booker, Donovan Jackson, Jonah, Tate Rutledge, Emory Jones, all those guys kind of would be fine picks in the second round. And then third round, you got guys like Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina, Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas, Nick Singleton, Dylan Sampson, running back out of Tennessee, Parker Brailsford, who's a center out of Alabama, Logan Jones, another center, Jonah Moheim, center out of USC, Charles Grant is a guy out of Williams and Mary, I think can play guard and tackle in the NFL, Armand Membu out of Mizzou, and then Greg Zabel out of North Dakota State. Like, you got options for the interior, right? It's not a great tackle draft. It's not the year where you're going to spend a 5th round pick on the tackle and feel great about it. But it might be a year where you spend a 3rd round, 5th round pick on a guard or a center and feel great about it, right? Like, I think the interior of this offensive line draft is pretty strong, and the running backs are pretty strong. So for me, that's what I would think. Hey, this is a great opportunity for the Browns to get better on the offensive line, in the run game, to be able to provide that option. Because the honest answer to all of this is, because the honest truth to all of this is, whether you're going to bring back Jameis, whether you're going to go after Sam Darnold, whether you're going to draft the rookie or go after Jacoby Brissett or whatever version of quarterback that you want, right? Whatever you're going to do at quarterback, it does not matter if you don't produce a run game. Because if you have to throw any of those quarterbacks or options I mentioned 60 times because you cannot move the ball on the ground, those quarterbacks are going to make a ton of mistakes. If you look at Jameis Winston, the one year that he was able to keep the interceptions down with the Saints, he had a top-tier running back in a top-tier run game with Alvin Kamara, right? There were games where Jameis only had to throw the ball 20 times. You could turn the faucet off with Jameis, right? If you knew you were going to give him one of those games where he was going to be very inaccurate, you could just turn the faucet off, run the ball, see what you could do with that, play a different kind of game, right? You need to be able to do that no matter if it's Jameis or Sam Darnold or whoever you go after, right? Sam Darnold, he's having a great season. He's keeping the interceptions down, but let's be honest about it. He has a run game. He has Justin Jefferson. He has outs to make sure that he doesn't have those interceptions. We don't have a Justin Jefferson, so we need to develop a running game. That's the big thing here. So that's how the Browns could go about fixing the run game. The good news here is that they have a lot of options. Like, if this is a year that you want to be able to go in to fix your run game, because there's running backs galore, there's guards galore, there's guards in free agency, there's a lot there. You can handle this and do this with a couple of picks and a couple of free agent signings, not spend more than like $16 million overall, and be fine with your run game and actually make it better and sustainable next year. Like, really can. What does this mean for the future of Nick Chubb? I am not of the opinion that you just cut bait with Nick Chubb because it looks like it's done. I have seen enough running backs the year after their injury not look like themselves, and then the year after they come back from the injury, they start to look like themselves, right? Derrick Henry was a similar story. Like, he looked a little bit slower the couple years coming off that injury. He gets Baltimore, he gets a good offensive line. All of a sudden, he looks amazing. Saquon Barkley, similar story in Philly versus New York, right? There's questions about if he can come back. Nick Chubb's a little bit different. He has had more injuries than at least not Derrick Henry, right? Saquon, he's had less injuries now. But maybe that's the case for Nick Chubb. It's not going to be expensive to bring him back. I don't see the reason not to bring him back and see what you have. But you can't just sit, hope, and pray that Nick Chubb's going to be Nick Chubb and that's going to save your run game, right? You need to put things in place that can also build this run game around other players, not just Nick Chubb. So Go after guards, go after center. I think those are the two main areas of improvement. If you want to keep Jack Conklin, that's fine, because you don't have trust in this tackle class and you feel like you can just hold up next year with Dewan at left and Jack Conklin at right, and then just swap out if Jack Conklin gets injured with a swing tackle that you like or something like that. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind that strategy at tackle, given that this year stinks at tackle. But I do really think that they should address guard here, right? They already got Zach Zinter. Maybe Zach Zinter shows something in the offseason and becomes a starting quality guard. If that happens, awesome. I'd rather have a surplus at the offensive line, right? Because let's say that does happen, right? Let's say the Browns go after Mekhi Becton, that works out. Let's say they go after Zach Zinter. Well, they see what they got in Zach Zinter, and over the offseason, they find out that Zach Zinter's really good, and he's a starting guard. And then they draft Kelvin Banks in the first round. Well, okay, bam. You got tackle, you got guard, and then now all you got to do is go ahead and get you a center, and you've rebuilt the offensive line completely because now you got Dewan at tackle, you got 2 new guards, and then you have a new center and a new tackle. That's a new offensive line, completely new offensive line. I think you would literally be returning nobody in that scenario. So easy rebuild there, right? If Zach Zinter works out. If Zach Zinter's not ready in year 2, which is fine, right? A lot of offensive linemen aren't ready in year 2. Then you have other options that you can move on to put guys out there, right? Like, so you have a lot of options. You can be super flexible. This is a good year to have to fix your run game because the draft and free agency. Let me know what you think, right? Do you think the Browns need to really invest in fixing their run game from the offensive line on in? Or do you think that the run game is just a product of the running backs that the Cleveland Browns have? I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think Nick Chubb isn't as good as he used to be. Jerome Ford is very up and down as a running back. And the offensive line is also very up and down. I think both things need a bit of a retouching this offseason. I don't think it's going to be, you got to tear it down, spend your whole draft on this. But I think you can make a couple of smart selections at a couple spots in the first 3 rounds, and you can really do a lot of legwork for fixing this offensive line and fixing this run game in the process. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.